Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar on Playspace Design Essentials with our National Supporting Corporate Partner, Proludic. I am Jasmine Ong. I'm one of the 5 National Board Directors of AILA, and I've designed a fair few playgrounds and open spaces in my career. But today is not about me presenting to you, it's about Proludic offering their expertise in this area. I'd firstly like to pay my respect to the local Indigenous Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people, the traditional custodians of the land I'm chairing this webinar from. We acknowledge and respect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of Australia as the traditional custodians of our lands, waters, and seas. We recognise their ability to care for country and their deep spiritual connection with country. We honour elders past and present whose knowledge and wisdom ensure the continuation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures. So a few housekeeping items. Please make sure you introduce yourself and where you're watching from in the chat box. Use the Q&A box for any questions for today's sessions. Note that today's session is being recorded and will be made available to registrants after this event. Today's session attracts CPD points, so following the webinar, you'll be emailed a learning reflection activity, which you can undertake if you wish to claim formal CPD points. We'd also love to hear your feedback about the webinar format as well. So you'll receive a survey straight after this event, and please let us know of any comments for improvement. Proludic are also currently conducting a survey to find out how they can help you with your open space designs. This link is in the chat box for you to complete. And you've got a chance to win a 400 mystery box from Wandu, full of premium Australian native goodies and homewares. So please feel free to fill that survey out and get in that chance to win that 400 voucher. Today's session will explore the principles of play space design and safety standards and the impacts of design choices on children's needs. So big welcome to our speakers today. We've got Nadia Stojan. She's an RLA, a registered landscape architect, and a Proludic consultant for Victoria East. With over 15 years of experience, Nadia has a thorough understanding of design process and the importance of good quality play design. She's a parent of young children, and she also brings valuable insights to projects from the point of view of a user. With a passion for inclusion, Nadia is also a member of the Proludic Observatory International Inclusive Committee. Boy, that was a mouthful. Nadia is a dynamic play consultant with a strong customer focus, and she brings a sense of enthusiasm, creativity, and optimism to all her work. And I'm sure all her little ones will testify to all the playscape designs that she's done as well. We've also got Lizzie Hazelwood as a presenter. She is a registered landscape architect and a Proludic design manager, highly skilled with over 20 years of professional experience in landscape architecture and urban design projects in both Australia and the UK. She's developed her playground design skills with a full understanding of Australian playground standards, and she excels in providing creative project solutions. Since 2015, Lizzie has led the design solutions for hundreds of Proludic's playground and outdoor fitness area projects in Australia. So welcome, Nadia and Lizzie. And I'll throw over to you, Nadia.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jasmine, for the wonderful introduction. And I must say, I'm really happy to be here today, virtually presenting to a lot of you who might be students, graduates, seniors, fellows from different industries as well, on a subject that I am really passionate about from the beginning of my career as a landscape architect and from the beginning of my life, I guess, play. So you talk about the back from the beginning of my life. So if you think about 30, 40 years ago, the role of landscape architects, how it has evolved from the work that we do, from infrastructure, from playgrounds, for example. Those were done by engineers. And now we're trusted as landscape architects to be designing beautiful play gardens for our community. And I guess it's a testament from organizations like AILA and the advocacy work of each one of us to show our value. So that's why I believe play is really important. And I really enjoy working Proludic. I guess one of the reasons why I love working with Proludic is because Proludic shares the same value that as I have as a professional landscape architect. It loves the work designing beautiful, high quality equipment for children, but it also values the importance of the environment that it sits in, values the importance of our environment, our future, and longevity. So I guess I wanted to highlight the importance of the work that we're doing here today as landscape architects, designing beautiful play gardens. So in this webinar, we will share some different ideas that you can use in your when designing some of the play spaces, understanding children development and common mistakes to avoid. So I'll share my presentation with you. And hopefully you can see it. They're full screen. So I guess we would like to start with some misconceptions that we might have in our profession. I guess it's all about collaboration in here. So what I would like to share is, for example, what landscape architects think of Playspace. So have a think about what Playspaces look like to you. And what do you think playground manufacturers think the playground looks like? So playground manufacturers will perhaps think that landscape architects think that this is a playground. And in the same way, landscape architects might think that playground equipment suppliers think that this is what a playground looks like. But in fact, what we're trying to create in collaboration with experts like us is a combination of natural elements that their play equipment will fit in. So the natural environment will support, the play equipment will support the natural environment that fits in, because the play equipment will support and enrich the opportunities for children to develop their fundamental skills, to socialize and have fun. So let's have a look at the agenda for today. So we're going to be touching on the basics of child development. And I can think of, as a landscape architect, we haven't been trained on human development, yet we're creating spaces, and especially play spaces, that are catering for the needs of children. So I think it's critical having a grasp on the basics of child development. We're going to look at play value and catering for all ages, planning for now and into the future. And my colleague Lizzie will share some insightful tips, design checklists, touch on safety standards. Common sense is not always common practice, and hopefully have some time for some questions at the end. So let's have a look at the basics of child development. So from our experience, in order to create the best spaces, it is really important to have a good understanding of it. And although most of us in this webinar will have gone through different stages of development, and we might remember what it's like to be a teenager and a child, but most of us don't really remember what is it like to be a baby. So you can see in this graph that there is massive developmental growth from a baby to teenagers and then adults. And if you think about what the spaces that you're creating for babies and toddlers, babies, they like to explore their own body and objects and at arm's reach. They are vocalizing, they're babbling, and they're developing the head control, weight bearing through the arms and hands, then crawling and then pulling. And as they move on to toddlers, it's a massive growth. It's only like 12 months. They're very egocentric. but they love to work in parallel play. They love to work with different materials like water, sand, and mud, and the integration of the vision and motor skills. This, grasping, walking, and running around. And when you get to 3 and 5, it's a role play age. It's all about the imagination. The physical agility is increased. They have more control of the finer motor skills. Then at school age, we're looking at physically the same proportion as adults. They have a very strong sense of balance. They like to extend the physical limits, and play can seem a bit risky. They don't want it to be seen as little children, and they seek support from peer groups. And 12, 16, it's a time of many changes occurring at different times and rates. There's rapid growth, and they want to be seen as a driver of behavior. So this is what it looks like in images, from the baby to physical active 6-year-olds to teenagers and adults. This is what you might see in the play space. So why is it really important to understand the basics of child development, you might say, in the planning of this space? So because we're designing the spaces, we have to look at the users of the space. We're creating spaces for them. And the requirements, the play, the physical and the social requirements are grouped into children and teenagers and adults, because remember, adults use those spaces as well. So as an example, when you're looking at a play space, the physical requirements of children perhaps will be fine motor, motor development. But the same physical requirements for teenagers will be about pushing their physical boundaries and body awareness. And for adults, well, it's maintaining a level of fitness and health. So I think that's a very useful, simple diagram that you could have next to your desk to prompt some ideas on your design. So let's have a look at play value, because I guess that's quite a lot of, comes up a lot of the questions, and how to add as much play value on spaces, especially when you have limited budget or limited space. And a lot of us would think play value are, swinging and spinning and climbing. But if you go through our website, we have a page where we have a lot of the different play values and play experiences that you might be able to get more details on. We're touching on, crawling. You forget that crawling is a play opportunity, is a play value, because you don't do that crawling anymore. Tactile stimulation, educational panels, and sheltering as well. And the way that I use, in a lot of the spaces, I like to use the amuse strategy. When you think about the word amuse, this is what we're trying to do with our open space, the playgrounds that we do. So if you think amuse as the word, A for appropriate seating and shade, M for movement and spin, because if you speak with a lot of occupational therapists, you understand that the importance of the vestibular part of the brain and the human development. Also upper body and active play. Children are not having enough of that these days. Sensory and imaginative play, and encompassing the space within the natural or urban environment. And Steve Warding, our managing director, puts like this: the most important question, I guess, to determine the value, the play value, is, does it foster the type of activity that children and carers want to engage with? So as we go throughout the webinar, feel free to pop in some key points or questions that you might have as well. And this section is planning for now and into the future. When you think about planning for now, when you're looking at our brief and our designs, we're wanting to cater for ages from 0 to 12 and plus. So using the play opportunities that will guide, but also look back at some of the projects that you have done some play projects that you have done. And I guess it's a good strategy for you to go back and revisit some of those spaces, because this is something that we do, and see how it's lasting through time. So Proludic, with our environmental policy, we do have a brochure as well. And we have our pillars of sustainability, taking action against global warming, proximity, and local presence. Looking at the materials that we use, looking at our repairability index of the equipment that we propose and we install. So, and an image at the bottom, it's a playground that we have installed in 2010, I believe. And as you can see, we have visited not long ago, and it's still in very good condition. We also have done a global study of 134 different playgrounds, and found that 90% of our old playgrounds are still fully functional. So if you want to learn a little bit more about those things, always feel free to get in touch with us. And I'll pass it on to my colleague Lizzie, the design manager. She'll introduce herself, and we'll go through some detailed designs.
Thank you, Nadia. Hi, my name is Lizzie Hazelwood. I'm a registered landscape architect and the design manager at Proludic. And today I was going to run through some considerations in your design process and items that would be critical to consider when designing a play space. So initially, when you're thinking about the preparation of a design, you would probably look at some community consultation. It doesn't always occur, but it's helpful to understand the needs and the desires of the local community. It informs the best possible play space design, whether it's a formal or an informal process. It helps you to understand the demographic, how children or visitors or parents use the space, things they like about the space or dislike, and can inform the types of play or the scale of play that would be incorporated, and also helps to understand things that are required, whether it be seating, signage, lighting, landscape improvements, perhaps as a broader master plan. Also helps to advise other influences might come into play, whether it be budget, local play networks, or future planning. There are numerous resources and guides available that will help to inform, including the Everyone Can Play guidelines in New South Wales, as equivalent in South Australia and Victoria. And also there are other sources, whether it be Play Australia, Parks and Leisure, and our very own website includes numerous design information and resources that you could utilise to help you. Once you start to gather that information, you can start to consider how the layout might work. Play zones are very important within the playground because they clarify whether the intended age groups, how they work together. The age range may be broad, it might be up to 16 years, or it may be more targeted for under 5-year-olds. You should allocate areas where there's some separation for these spaces, but also some integration. It allows for a safer sort of play space and interactions and activities. Intensive use areas such as high activity zone where there's dynamic equipment should be somewhat separated from areas where there's calm and respite for quiet play. The connections between these zones are important, whether there are pathways that help to navigate, and also it allows for continued growth as children develop and grow. They can move from one area to another zone. The next thing to really consider is the topography of the site. Changes in level can enhance the diversity of a play space and provide challenge as well. Natural topography can be utilised. Equipment can be integrated, whether it be embankment play or multi-level structures. However, bear in mind that generally flat areas are required for most equipment. They are designed to accord to a standard, and changes in level require consideration of platform heights, ladder rails, step access. So always best to consider the grading and selection of equipment in tandem. Another item that's very key to your playground is your surfacing and edging. So all play elements in the play space must consider the surfacing requirements. It's defined within the playground standards, and that safety surfacing is required to ensure that the zone is as safe as can be. Play surfacing can be loose fill, whether it be mulch or sand, or it can be unitary surfacing, rubber, synthetic grass, or a combination of both, which is often the preference because it provides variety across the play space. So you need to consider the impact attenuation or the depth of those areas. And the other thing to consider is also the edge treatments and how they are defining the play area. They actually retain that surfacing and also provide for ease of maintenance. Options might be varied: concrete, stone, timber, rocks, logs, or just simply rubber that's rolled into the grass. The selection of these features can influence the budget significantly. For example, rubber wear pads where there's high use areas at ends of slides, under swings, etc., are valuable because they reduce that maintenance issues, but also combined with loose fill surfacing can provide a great low maintenance economic solution. Again, minimal rubber colours are something that's more economic to consider as well if you're looking at your budgets. The next thing that I'd like to talk about quickly is inclusiveness, and we endeavour to embed inclusive design into every play space that we create. We utilise equipment with inclusive features that allow for play for all, and please seek advice for equipment ideas that cater for sensory, auditory, visual, learning difficulties, motor impairments. Consider the carers and how they might use the playground as well, and the equipment and facilities that are in the surrounding area. This subject will probably be touched on to a greater deal of depth in tomorrow's webinar, which is on inclusive play. So there's a broad subject matter there where we can move forward. Another thing to consider is theming or interpretation within your play space. It can create a unique and connect your play space to the locality. We can assist with specific theming, and often there are some customized products that help to enhance that. Consider the equipment form, graphics, colours, text, historic references or local fauna and fauna, and even the work of local artists can all be incorporated within the play space. This also leads on to consideration of colour and tone in the play area. It may be subtle to highlight particular elements, or it might be used en masse or creating pops of colour in a natural or urban setting. The colour contrast on equipment surfacing is great for visually impaired or helps to guide and stimulate play. But always consider the balance of your tonal choices, avoiding clashes of colours between equipment selections, rubber surfacing and shade sails allows for a more harmonious experience for all. And then I was also going to touch on one of the key foundations of play space design is indeed safety. So within the public realm, compliance with the safety guidelines, specifically Australian playground standards, is critical to delivering a safe and structurally sound and diverse facility. It can also incorporate community safety by design considerations with allowance for passive surveillance, avoidance of enclosed structures, and incorporating lighting to help minimise antisocial behaviour. This is on the slide here at a particular play space where it touches on all those features, whether it be access, signage, fencing. The high active areas are separate from those more gentle play areas where there's toddlers in play, and then it includes inclusivity throughout. Thanks, Nadia. So next. The underlining or the underpinning element of play design often is the safety standards, and we must consider it throughout. The playground safety standard is the AS 4685 document, but there are others that touch on implementation, surfacing, that should also as well be considered. The standard is based on an European standard with modifications within, and a set of documents includes general safety and also specific parts relating to swings, slides, cableways, carousels, and rocking equipment. There's also spatial networks and bouncing facilities within that range of standards as well. It defines the safety requirements for permanently installed playground equipment, includes details of manufacturing tolerances, entrapment information, free height of fall, impact areas, and free space definitions, which I'll touch on shortly. It also includes some safety requirements for specific supervised early childhood areas, which differ slightly. So be aware of where you're designing and who you're designing for. The standards have slight variations amongst. I won't elaborate on the full details, but I just wanted to mention some key considerations from the safety standards that should help you understand how to design and what equipment is suitable. The standards define what's known as easily accessible and non-easily accessible equipment, and this guides the design and manufacture of the play equipment. It considers the heights of the platforms, the barriers, the access means, whether it be ladders, steps, which ensures the safety of users, and it depends on their age and ability. So briefly, the easily accessible equipment, it requires only basic skills to access the equipment. Users are able to move freely onto and within the equipment. And this is specifically in regards to hands and feet and how they access the equipment. So it generally encompasses the younger age range and users with limited mobility. Features might include steps, ramps, full height barriers, but low level platforms. So this is suitable for your toddlers and babies, crawling babies, etc. The categories of non-easily accessible equipment incorporate greater challenge and awareness of the use of your hands and feet to negotiate your access. So generally this is allowing for older users, incorporating greater risk, higher platforms, limited barriers, use of guardrails, steep elements, and increased mobility challenges. Knowing how those two definitions work will help guide in terms of what equipment is best placed or how the design of the playground works. The other thing that's important to understand is each play equipment is defined with an impact area, an area that can be hit by the user after falling through a falling space, falling from a platform or a play element, a rope net, etc. So the impact area is assigned what's known as a free height of fall, which is generally based upon the height of the equipment or the platform. So that can vary around a piece of equipment depending upon its structure and heights. And the free height of the fall will define how deep your safety surfacing is required to be to reduce risk of injury if you should fall onto it. You should note that anything over with a free height of fall over 600 high will require a safety surfacing, whether that be rubber, sand, or notch. Another zone that's important to understand is the free space that is applied to certain pieces of equipment. The equipment where the user is subject to a movement forced by the equipment, whether it be, say, a slide or a swing, has a defined free space. That movement, once started, cannot be controlled by the user. So it's a three-dimensional zone through which the user moves. And specifically, the standard dictates equipment subject to forced movement cannot have overlapping impact areas. So these dynamic pieces of equipment therefore retain a clear area around to facilitate safe use. So as professional play equipment designers, we can offer assistance, we can help you out with understanding the layout and what's best. We do offer a design check service where our equipment layout and we can identify any potential issues prior to finalisation of your playground design budget. This is an example of plan view with equipment. The pink zones are the impact areas and the green lines are the free spaces. So you see the swing has that free space zone, equally does the carousel, the top right corner. And the blue lines indicate areas where the free height of fall differs. Obviously, rubber suppliers are able to facilitate what depth is required to work with those free height falls. And that's defined in the standards as well. So lastly, I was going to touch on common sense. It's not always common practice. And there's several things that often come up with designs that we might see, and not to say the list is exhaustive, but a couple of things wanted to chat about. Slides, and often maybe we're facing what we would call the wrong way. So we would recommend all slides are orientated to the south or southeast to minimize excessive heating of the slide bed. This can be an issue if a slide's in a hot playground with no shade. It's definitely something that's worth considering its orientation just to minimize that heat. Another thing that often happens is with dynamic equipment, there are often some safety issues because the equipment is not located, or it's located adjacent to thoroughfares or entries, particularly swings where children often may walk in front of the swing. So a simple layout adjustment can make that a safer place. Children typically have tunnel vision, so the play design should endeavour to avoid predation of what may be incident zones or high activity areas, not next to toddler play zones. You should visualise the movement of the children and carers within the playground. They're running to the bubblers, they're trying to get to the big tower to ensure that dynamic equipment is set in a place that's safer. Another thing that often catches our eye is where rubber surfacing is being put in, generally to improve access, provide inclusive and links, but say the surfacing does not link from the ramp of said equipment to a path or entry, so it becomes obsolete in its value. We're trying to ensure we have unimpeded access to wheelchairs and strollers, so there's no steps or edging obstacles between the rubber area and the entry of the playground. Also, something that's always to be considered is the rubber jointing. If we can minimise rubber jointing, it's useful because it also helps to keep the cost implications balanced. Joints which are located between different colours of rubber in highway areas are often a future maintenance issue. So considering where the joints are, how many colours are, and whether the time and the cost implications to create the elaborate pattern is valued and beneficial. Other areas where we notice things, impact areas, understanding the difference between the static and the forced movement equipment allows you to place them well into the playground and avoid overlapping issues of impact areas. We always recommend some minimum offsets from the edges of playgrounds and footpaths to allow for construction discrepancies. And we also would recommend allowing space between impact areas as well, in case adjustments have to be made on site. The very key thing is to ensure there are no obstacles in the impact areas, boulders, fencing, seats, which all contradict the standards. And then another area where levels and access and drainage are the actual equipment installation can be problematic. Can the truck access the site to install that equipment? Is there room? Is the equipment installed prior to the footpaths? Edgings and rocks can be placed after, which allows compliance with the impact areas in place. And also, should embankment slides be incorporated? The actual batter of the embankment is often a problem area. So it needs to be clarified prior to construction works to ensure a seamless process and that the grade of the slide matches the embankment. Finish levels across the equipment are often something that needs to be considered well, because the surfacing depths are critical for compliance. So the depth of the rubber compared to the depth of the mulch and how they interact is very important. And lastly, how shade structures interact with the equipment and the clearances required between equipment and shade heights. That will affect equipment selection and location, and maybe removing the roof elements of play equipment will help to improve that. And also I'd like to talk about skin care and heat in the playgrounds. we would encourage utilising shade wherever feasible, whether it be natural or structural, with a focus on protection for toddlers, where high skin contact elements are slides, seating areas, etc. And certainly you can refer to the Shade Smart information from the AILA webinar series, which will help with that. We also recommend incorporating light hues to equipment surfacing, zones where there's high skin contact, slide beds, swing seats, and carousels, etc. And then this next slide is a beautiful little playground that sits in South Australia, just to illustrate the combination of footpaths, local facilities, edging treatment, surfacing, natural shade, and a harmonious play selection of equipment that provides a very beautiful little playground. Quite a small scale, but actually very effective. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Lizzie and Nadia. That was very thorough. Would love to hear from the audience. Sorry, Nadia.
Yeah, no, just to finish it off. Thank you so much, Lizzie. I just want to finish it off with just showing the team, the wonderful team that we have here in Australia. And it's not just Lizzie and I. We have different playground consultants through different states. We have designs, after sales. We have a whole team of construction coordinators as well. So basically we are here, as I touched on, it's all about collaboration. And what we are here for is to help your work, assist your work to ensure that it's safe, it's inspiring, and it helps to meet the needs of the community that you're designing for. Also, would like to highlight as well that we do have a survey, as Jasmine mentioned earlier on, and we do have a lovely prize, the Premium Australian Native goodies as well, homewares valued at over $400. And here's a QR code if you have your phones and would you like to scan that so you can go into the survey, but also there's also a link on the chat box. And yeah, just would love to hear any questions any might have, and I'll pass it on to Jasmine.
Thank you, Nadia. Yes, as mentioned earlier, if you've got any questions, please pop it into the Q&A box. If you've got any playground designs that you're currently working on and have any burning questions that might clarify your design processes, pop it in. Our first question for this session, can I please ask what your understanding is of the distance equipment needs to be from shade structure posts and fabric or cloth?
I'll go for that one. So in terms of distance from shade posts, obviously the impact areas will guide that, and then another offset potentially to allow for the structure of the footings. But in terms of the heights and the offset to shade sails or structures, it's not a defined, but we always use a guideline of 2.5 meters. What we do find is that generally local authorities will have potentially their own requirements, whether it be the clearance from the structure of the unit or from the platform of the unit. It does differ. So I would investigate directly with the client, as it were, first. But then I think we also engage with the shade shell guys to try and optimize the amount of shade without, the higher you go, obviously the clearer the issues are with shade coverage.
Great, thanks for that, Lizzie. It's wonderful to just take note of the audience here. We've got quite a number of students, private practitioners, and people from multidisciplinary practices, and inclusive of play design experts as well, and covering quite a wide geography across Australia. So nice to see you all. Our next question comes from Emily Colling. With the analysis of your old playgrounds, what was the most common problems that led to some of them not being fully functional?
Nadia, do you want to do that or shall I?
So Thanks, Jasmine. So in terms of the playgrounds that we have collaborated with, there hasn't been functional, or it could have functioned better. What I can see most of it is probably mainly through the construction phase. I believe, as Lizzie have touched on, the importance of coordinating what comes first. So I think majority of the times would be during the design and construction phase, where the play space could have done, could be a smoother process with less issues on site, and also understanding of the topography as well, having to deal with those things on site, having to deal with those things on site later on can be a bit challenging and stressful as well.
And I also add, Nadia, I think in terms of these older playgrounds, one of the key issues we found was potentially the lack of maintenance for those play zones. So if, cable ways haven't been tightened, or elements not repaired or checked, they often lead to the wear and the issues, whereas consistent maintenance really does prolong their lifespan.
Yeah, I think it's really important, Lizzie, because when people think about playgrounds, it's not just something that we're just putting on and we forget about it. It's like anything that we have, it might be a car or maybe anything else. You don't just buy something, you have to have ongoing maintenance to ensure its longevity. And I think with Proludic having construction coordinators on site and having our team at after sales to ensure that we can support you and your clients with the ongoing maintenance, spare parts and things like that, I think it's really critical.
Thanks, Nadia and Lizzie. And on that note, does Proludic provide maintenance guidance for equipment provided by yourselves?
Yes.
Each product has a maintenance schedule, as it were, or details that are issued to the client at the handover.
Yes, so as Lizzie mentioned, upon the completion of all the work that we do, there is a maintenance guide, which is part of the handover documentation. So you might be working with as landscape architects, you might be doing work for putting it out to tender, which will go to a landscape contractor, and all the maintenance work or the handover documentation will be there, and they will pass it on to the facilities manager at council and whoever it is with our contacts, and they can contact us directly if they need any assistance with that as well.
Great, that's handy. Our next question comes from Van Hong. How can you adapt inclusive design in your layout?
Thank you, Jasmine. Just reminding that we do have a webinar tomorrow, so if you're really interested about more inclusive, please tune in to that one. But as I mentioned, all the work that we do, we're trying to include as much inclusiveness as we can, but that is sometimes can be limited due to budgets and things like that. So I'll go back to my Muse strategy. And ensure that we do have those key points of your accessibility. You have the upper body, vestibular, spin, encompassing the environment, but looking at different types of equipment as well. We might take for granted a lot of the equipment that can provide inclusiveness to it. For example, it can be a cubby house, it can be a shelter with tactile play features in it. And we're definitely able to assist you with whatever project that you have to maximize the inclusive components of your designs.
Wonderful, thanks, Nadia. Our next question comes from Emily Colling. What's your measure of success for playgrounds, and do you measure usage levels, especially when other playgrounds are nearby where people are opting for a certain experience?
Measure of success? Yes, I would say playgrounds where children are having fun, growing. In terms of usage, it it really depends on the time of the day that you're going. You might be surprised that you might go past a playground and you might say, oh, it's empty. There's no children playing. But you're just not understanding sometimes the community. You might have communities that might prefer to go early in the morning or later afternoon. But I think those playgrounds that caters for the needs of very young children, because that's where majority of the growth is happening. I would be one of my key criteria, very young children, seating and shade, and I'm sure Lizzie will have others ones as well.
I was going to say we do continually visit our playgrounds to consider their success and measure how they're performing or how they're wearing and maintaining, and then often success is often measured by our clients and the feedback that we will receive from them. So that's also a key element to understanding their success.
Great, thanks Lizzie and Nadia. The next question relates to budget. How do we meet the requirements of playground design within a limited budget? Who would like to take this one?
I can touch on that one a little bit, and I guess probably I do work on a lot of designs with very limited budgets. So you might see a lot of those in the media, the big shiny playgrounds, award winnings, and not all of us will have hands-on projects like this. And majority of the playgrounds that I do take my children are the local playgrounds. Those are the ones that I believe children have the opportunity to engage with the local community, their friends from school or kinder. And I guess it's just understanding the different play values. So once you understand the different play values, you will be able to then pull out one of the most important ones, like spinning and swinging and climbing, and ensure that you have ticked all those boxes from the design checklist, and then looking at the different surfaces as well. So you might not be able to put rubber everywhere. You might have to be limited and maybe wear pads, and take advantage of the surrounding environment that you have. You might have existing trees rather than planting new ones, and working with the land, working with the topography, so less earthworks to do. And Lizzie, do you have any other ones that you might be able to?
No, I think selection of your equipment to try and give a broader range of options and play features is important, and the surfacing costs can be some of the most significant costs. So considering where rubber is essential and what makes the most effective use of it is probably one of the key things.
Great, thanks Lizzie and Nadia. Just a reminder that if you're wanting to participate in that Proludic survey, the link is further up the chat box. So just scroll up to the top there and you'll be able to see the link. Question on age range of children. What is the most important age group of children to cater for in the playground? I think, Nadia, you touched on this earlier in terms of answering the success of Playspace. Did you want to elaborate on this further?
I could, and then I would say, well, we do need to cater for all ages, basically, which, it goes from 0 to all the way to adults. But if you understand the child development and where it happens, so 90% of our brain or development happens on the first 5 years. And you probably heard some on the news that Thrive by 5. So when you're focusing on that age group, especially local play spaces, because as children goes to school, they're going to have the playgrounds at school, but the local parks not really catering much for the needs of the very young children. So a designer might just say, oh, I've catered because there's a swing set that has a baby seat in it. And the challenge, what happens is, because there's not much stuff for babies to do, there comes a level of risk, because parents are now picking up their babies and toddlers and putting them on those big structures for them to go down those bigger slides, because there's not a smaller slide for the babies to do. So this is why I would ensure that there's enough play equipment ergonomically designed for children that are 0 to 5.
Thanks, Nadia. And this is a question that comes from Ian Bentley, which I think is a really important one. How do we design for youth, and in particular teenage girls in playgrounds? Lizzie, can I throw that one to you?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a group that's often not seen so much in the playgrounds, and the teenage girls obviously prefer a different element to their play, and they change, and they're more social, perhaps. So socializing, group seating, the pod swing, the group swings are useful and good for teenage girls. Shelters, trampolines are also another layer where it's not so much about physical strength, but maybe more so about group play, or social. And things that are fun for them, not so much, as I say, about strength in the upper body, balancing, swinging, parallel bars. You often see the younger teens with, roly-polies, those kind of things. Those are the elements, I think, for teenage girls which help in play spaces.
What about just vacant space, like space where you can actually just practice performance and TikTok dancing and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, my daughter.
Nadia?
Well, it's interesting enough. My daughter just went to pick up her from school yesterday, and she mentioned that she was doing an act with one of her friends. They were just still in that imaginative play and still performing and doing so. As you mentioned, having a space there where it can be used as a stage. And children are very creative as well. They can use the space surrounding them to get prompts for their imagination. But they also like to be hanging upside down. They love those rollover bars that they like to climb, and they like to move, like a lot of the spinning elements as well. Girls love to do that, and running around. And I guess it's just sometimes some spaces that are created are not really inclusive for girls, because they might fear that it's being inundated by boys, for example. So they feel like, oh, it's not a space for me. But they still like to play tags, and as Lizzie mentioned, it's the social. They want to go there, like youth. They want to go there with their friends, not on their own, to play with their mum and dad. Yeah.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's really easy to cater for teenage boys, particularly when, the client's brief says cater for teenage group. And we often think about basketball courts and skate parks and parkour and the like. And that's really quite biased towards male teenagers. And so sometimes we do forget to think about including females in that space. There's a really great initiative set up in the UK called Make Space for Girls. So have a look at that in terms of inclusivity in design, particularly cater for girls and in that particular age group as well. I think that's a really important point there. The next question is with regards to risk versus safety. Noting also that you gave a very comprehensive presentation there, Lizzie, about complying with Australian standards. How do we cater for the balance between allowing a little bit of risk for adventure versus being compliant with safety standards, but enough to actually encourage imaginative play, and a little bit of risk that sort of provokes, that adventure?
Yeah, I think the essence of the standards isn't to restrict risk, certainly. I think it's there to ensure that there's challenge within equipment, and that so the basics are there, but actually how the children negotiate the equipment and the variety in the equipment, whether it be the angles or the levels or the spaces that they have to move through, allow them to develop and grow. And so one week they can't do one thing and the next week they can do it. So I think the standards don't restrict the risk, and I think we should definitely encourage it within the play space. It's just getting the balance between the age ranges, and so some risky play for a smaller child is obviously may just be balancing on a log, whereas an older teen might need something more thrilling to engage with them.
I think a lot of the times too, whoever who is mostly restricting the risk, restricting risk is, as an example, so if you're working, doing work for any school environment, you often asked, oh, they've got a monkey bar and we want to remove the monkey bar because a lot of children, you know, having lots of accidents. Then you ask the question, well, is it actually the monkey bar who is being risky, or it's just there's not enough equipment or playthings for kids to do, and they're all working on the monkey bar and getting injured because of that. So I think a lot of the times sometimes might be your clients or councils who are more risk averse than, as Lizzie mentioned, the safety standards.
Great. The next question is with regards to play auditors. What are the recommended design stages that you'd need to engage a play auditor in the design process? Nadia, can I throw this one to you?
Yeah, of course. We do have a lot of work with landscape architects who it's a requirement from their clients to have a playground auditor, a design check through the process, and through the recommendation, I guess, would be definitely, if necessary, that playground auditor who does a design. Not all playground auditors do design checks, so you have to ensure that the ones that you're working with does. Also, depending on your client, council, which playground auditor do they have their preference or they use. So you can ensure that there's a smooth process and you don't encounter clashing, because the design standard is all about interpretations, and one playground auditor will have a different interpretation than each other, so it can cause a bit of frustration. So we also, as playground manufacturers and designers, we do also offer design checks, as Lizzie mentioned, just to ensure that there's not a lot of mistakes or, you know, common sense and some of those things. But definitely during your design process, towards final stages of the design before it's tendered, that would be our recommendation. And unless, Lizzie, you've got any further points to make.
No, I think that's right. I think the auditor's role sits at numerous places in the process, but pre-tender documentation is a useful moment, because if you go through the process and then it's built and then there is safety issues, that's a harder thing to fix.
And on that note, Zoe Maris has a comment that the new ISO standards on benefit risk assessment is useful to anyone undertaking risky play environments when designing something that is not covered off by the standards. Thank you, Zoe. On that note, we'd like to wrap this up. Thank you for attending today's webinar. Thank you to Lizzie and Nadia from Proludic for their continued support and education opportunities for our members. Keep an eye out for the evaluation form that's going to come out after today's session. And click on the link of the recording if you weren't able to join in at the start. And a reminder that Proludic is also hosting another webinar tomorrow. This time it's about how to design meaningful, inclusive play spaces. This will be held at the same time tomorrow, so if you haven't already registered, please do so. And make sure you visit aila.org.au/events to register for the session. Thank you very much.